Hey everyone, welcome back to Installation 00, and today we take a look at the flood and ask a very important but very simple question. But first, a little relevant information about the flood. The flood are a parasite of devastating lethality and do not discriminate between species upon which they intend to consume, unless there is a strategic advantage to doing so. In a biological manner, the flood are the exact opposite of nature, of natural biology, normal evolution and coexistence of life. Their mode of growth and reproduction would make them incompatible with any natural ecosystem. They are extremely adaptive and transform hosts to suit their species' current needs. Capable of surviving extreme environments ranging from -75 to +53 degrees Celsius and even underwater, the flood can withstand the varied environments of all known inhabited planets. However, the flood seem to thrive the most in moist and humid areas. It is thought that the extreme cold artificial weather patterns near certain important areas of the halo rings are intended to hinder the flood. In order to give themselves ideal living conditions, the flood will transform the environment to better suit their needs, altering the atmosphere and covering solid surfaces with flood biomass. All flood biomatter is made of a unique undifferentiated supercell which relays information and coordinates the cellular assembly like conventional neural cells. It is capable of flexing and moving in coordination with other cells and can be arranged to mimic any bodily organ that is required for the flood's use. This combination of traits caused some to refer to it as a thinking muscle. The flood supercell physically resembles both neuron and glial cells in structure, with a central cell body and many tendril-like branching structures. In order to reproduce and grow in biomass, the flood needs to infect and assimilate other life forms. While capable of infecting nearly any organism, the flood shows a strong preference for sentient life forms, as assimilating their cerebral tissue allows the flood to increase its overall intelligence. The first stage of a flood outbreak is typically initiated by contact with flood spores, or even more reduced forms of flood biomatter, should no extinct flood forms be present. Once a basic infestation has been established, flood infection is typically carried out by pod infectors, which are some of the most complex forms that can be generated from flood biomass during the feral stage. Upon sighting a host, a pod infector will leap for the most accessible area of the victim's torso. If the target is an armed human or other bipedal species, this is typically the left side of the chest, below the neck, as most combatants will expose this area while shouldering their weapon. Upon contact, the pod infector will rip away at clothing and flesh until it has burrowed into the chest cavity, mortally wounding them. As the host dies, the pod infector extends tentacles that tap into the victim's spinal cord or other nerve centers, forcing a match with the nerve signals previously produced by the host's living brain. To begin the physiological conversion of a host, the pod infector injects encapsulated flood supercells into the body. As it does so, the form analyzes the entire genetic code of its host, allowing the flood to determine the most effective use of the victim. Simultaneously, the inserted flood cells capture and break down the host's body cells into organic raw material, which is then absorbed and assimilated into the attacking flood cells. The flood infection then uses the absorbed biomass to create new masses of flood supercells. As the flood continues to use the resources of the host's body, particularly its calcium reserves, the parasite's own cells build upon and augment the framework of the host to produce one of a variety of feral stage forms. This entire process, from initial kill to total control of the mutated host body, takes only a matter of seconds. The infection process is not limited to living hosts. Organisms that are already deceased are also susceptible to infection. As long as the host is not decomposed to the point where the body and nervous system have completely deteriorated, the pod infector can infect and convert the host. The flood infection utilizes the host's biological content as fuel for its work, which is consumed and employed at prodigious speeds. From the beginning until the end of this complex multi-step process, the pod infector keeps the body alive by chemically isolating the host's dying brain, preventing the signals of brain death from reaching the rest of the body and causing it to shut down, which is an essential part of the parasite's mission of consuming and converting the host organism. While the pod infectors are an effective and economical means of delivering infection, particularly against armoured targets, the flood can infest hosts through other means. Flood spores, if inhaled, can transform a host into a combat form. This is the flood's primary means of infection. When an outbreak reaches a certain point, flood spores will be deployed into a local biosphere in copious quantities, instantly overwhelming any unprotected biological targets. Flood conversion may also be initiated through contact with lacerated tissue, making any flood form a potential vector for infection. Even the most basic form of flood genetic material is virulent. Once inserted into a host, it will mutate the host's DNA over the course of generations until it is capable of forming its own flood supercells. When infected by these mechanisms, host organisms tend to mutate at a more restrained level that maintains the structure and form of the infective life form, albeit with a significant number of haphazardly placed tendrils, claws, and minor organs such as sensory stalks. Any useful information present within the memory centres of the host's brain, such as battle strategies and technical knowledge, is retained for use by the flood. Despite this lingering of certain memories, no trace of the original mind remains. Only a simplistic and primal urge to assimilate other species drives the organism after infection. However, the entirety of the host's mental content is seemingly absorbed and added to the whole, as the grave mind has shown to be able to simulate its victims' consciousnesses within itself. In isolated cases, such as when the flood seek very specific information from an individual's mind, they utilize an alternate method of infestation that does not subdue the host's consciousness immediately despite mutating their physical form. This allows the flood to burrow into the host's mind, eventually giving them access to the entire scope of the host's memories. This has only been specifically seen when the flood sought information from Captain Jacob Keyes, such as the location of Earth, or a starship that would free them from Installation 04. In addition, if the pod infector that initiates assimilation is extremely aged or damaged somehow, the host may remain alive and conscious. Private Wallace Jenkins suffered such a fate, remaining alive and fully aware of his situation despite the mutation of his form, even exhibiting limited control over his body at times when the flood instincts were dormant. When the flood have amassed enough sentient hosts to form a grave mind, then their behaviour becomes far more coordinated, and the flood collective becomes much more deadly as a result. The grave mind may also speak directly through combat forms and pure forms under its control. So with the entire collective intelligence of every single individual consciousness that the flood has consumed, why have the flood never built anything to assist them strategically? Why have the flood not created armour, weapons, ships or technology? Quite rightly, with the knowledge the flood possesses and the amount of quote-unquote manpower they have, the flood should be able to create technology that is extraordinarily advanced. Yet we see nothing. They can control technology. We've seen flood forms driving warhawks, ghosts and wraiths, and we've seen them use weapons and even fly starships, so why, if they can do all that, have they not gone further? Well, that right there is one reason. They can use all of the equipment they need to that is generally left lying around when they infect their hosts. Their hosts wouldn't go down without a fight, so ultimately, when the flood succeeded, the being infected stands back up as a combat form and now wears their armour, and has their weapon close to hand, and the flood has direct access to the being's memories and intelligence on how to actually use and control the weapon. The other argument is that since the flood are corrupted precursors, their technology would be neural physical, just like the precursors was, but yet we see no evidence of new precursor artifacts or constructs being made. Indeed, save for the flood, practically nothing of the precursors still exists in the galaxy since the Halo array was fired all those millennia ago, because the Halo's effects target neural physical constructs. If the flood could build neural physics, we'd see new neural physics appearing in the galaxy, but we don't. The reason being is that the flood, while related to the precursors, they are still very far removed. Rather than giving life, as the precursors once did, they take life in a way that only a parasite could. In this respect, it could be argued that they don't need to build anything. They are a parasitic life form that takes weapons and armour and knowledge from their prey, while also learning how to use their weapons, technology, ships, vehicles and so on, which means that there is no necessity to build anything, because why build when you can just take what others have done and use it for your own gain? And that right there is the definition of a parasite, and in real world terms, a pretty shitty human being. So the moral of the story here is, don't be a parasite. Be a human. Thanks for watching. Stick a comment down below, I look forward to what you have to say. I want to give a quick shout out to my patrons: Nathan the Silent Cartographer, Miguel, Brian, Sebastian, Holden, the Holders of the Mantle, Justin, Darian, Ty, Iron Griffin and Black Biscuit, my Reclaimers, Zach, Deep Cover, Verbal Statue, Spesico, Spartan A498, Guppy and Josh, my Metarchs, and all the other patrons that have jumped aboard to support the channel. You guys are awesome, and all of this wouldn't be possible without you. If you would like Halo lore discussed to insane levels of detail, hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon so you're told the second a new video hits the shelves. Be sure to support us on all major social media channels, including Discord, and if you really love the channel, consider heading over to Patreon and supporting the channel over there. It would mean the world to me and would free up more of my time to put into this content and other Halo related goodness. Take it easy everyone. Find peace in the domain.